He is one of the most infamous serial killers in modern history, Jeffrey Dahmer. He was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA. This necrophiliac and cannibal murdered 17 men and boys over the course of 13 years. But what was going on in the mind of this monster? Are killers born evil, or do they become evil over time? Hello, welcome to the Crime Documentary Files channel. It all began on July 22, 1991, when two patrolling officers saw a black man named Tracy Edwards, covered in blood and handcuffed, crying out that someone was trying to kill him and eat his heart. Following his lead, the police were taken to an apartment and arrived at room 213. When the door opened, they were met by a very clean-cut young white man who calmly directed them to the room where the handcuff keys were. The police followed what he said and entered what would later be known as the hellish suite. As soon as they walked in, there were all sorts of jars, big and small. These jars contained various parts of the human body, such as genitals, palms, and heads. They were scattered all over the apartment, some frozen, some cooked, and some preserved as specimens. Some were even made into sculptures. The entire bed was covered with Polaroid photos. What was even more terrifying about these Polaroid photos was that when the police picked them up, they realized that they depicted a normal person, seemingly having fun, drinking and chatting happily. Then gradually, the photos showed the body being stripped naked, as if in a state of unconsciousness, and later being dissected with sulfuric acid to corrode the body. All these photos were laid out in front of the police, one by one. Later, they found something very important in his room: a large freezer. When they opened the freezer, the police couldn't believe what they were seeing. They saw neatly cut up and packaged pieces of human flesh, fresh organs, and 3 intact skulls. Just in the apartment alone, the police found the remains of a total of 17 victims. What shocked them wasn't just the precision in handling the bodies, but also the bizarre way the bodies were displayed afterward, leaving the authorities puzzled. Actually, Jeffrey Dahmer didn't grow up in a problematic family. Strictly speaking, the most serious psychological trauma he faced was probably his parents' divorce. However, he had a strange fascination with animal corpses from a young age. Around the age of 15, he developed a habit of drinking. Due to his peculiar behavior, his father suggested he join the military in hopes of straightening him out. However, during his service in Germany, he was found to engage in misconduct, such as sexual harassment and making insulting gestures to others, resulting in his official discharge from the military. Later, his parents, in order to make him repent and change for the better, decided to have him move in with his grandmother. His grandmother lived in a rather remote farmhouse-like house. It was at this time that all his desires started to unfold, because there was no one keeping an eye on him. During the summer of 1978, Dahmer developed some rather twisted thoughts. He thought it would be great to have a real person in front of him who could become his sex slave. When he was engrossed in these thoughts, he encountered his first victim while he was driving one day, an 18-year-old named Steven Hicks. Initially, Steven and Jeffrey seemed to get along very well, chatting and drinking together. Soon after, they started having sex. While Jeffrey was feeling love and intimacy, Steven felt it was time to leave. As Steven was leaving, Jeffrey started to feel like he didn't know what to do. His only reflex was to immediately pick up something heavy and knock Steven unconscious from the back of his head. After knocking him out, Jeffrey realized that his impulsiveness had caused serious harm. He had actually taken another person's life with his own hands. At that moment, he really didn't know what to do and was not mentally prepared to deal with a dead body. So he transported Steven's body back to his grandmother's house. He was extremely meticulous in handling Steven's body, even going as far as to crush his bones, ensuring that there was no trace left behind. It was evident how careful he was in handling the situation. Between 1981 and 1987, Jeffrey actually appeared stable and had not committed any crimes. So why did he not kill for years? He later revealed that he had struggled to accept the killing of his first victim. This inner turmoil led him to consciously suppress the urge to kill. However, over time, this urge consumed his rationality. Despite his attempts to resist, he eventually succumbed to the overpowering desire. By 1987, he took the life of his second victim. Subsequently, he frequented gay bars in search of his next prey. The second victim, like the first one, was found by him in a gay bar. He would tell them, "Okay, why don't you come to my place for a drink? Spend some time together, just hang out at my place. Don't think too much of it." Of course, things started happening after they arrived at his place. He mentioned that the second victim actually went back with him to a hotel, not to his home. However, he himself didn't know exactly what happened. He said that the next day when he woke up, he noticed that the second victim had blood coming out of his mouth and had already been dead for some time. At this moment, he realized that he might have killed someone again. However, he remained unusually calm because he was only thinking about how to deal with the body. So he quickly and calmly left the hotel, immediately bought a large suitcase, went back to the hotel, stuffed the victim's body into the suitcase, and then took him back to the basement of his rented house. During the next month, he targeted another victim at a nightclub, a 14-year-old boy. His modus operandi remained consistent, luring them back to his place or a hotel, then committing sexual assault after they had been drugged. He also had a habit of documenting the entire process with a Polaroid camera. He justified this by claiming that he thought these guys that he found at the nightclub were extremely attractive and that he wanted to capture them in their entirety. And after he was done with them, he would take pictures again, enabling him to reminisce about the feeling of owning them in the past. In 1988, he killed a third victim, which left Dahmer at a loss of what to do. He was actually very scared of his urge to kill like this, but he couldn't control himself from actually killing people. In the same year, in the fall, or autumn of 1988, his grandmother asked him to move out because of a foul smell coming from the basement. That led him to start looking for a new apartment, which eventually turned out to be the place where he was eventually arrested by the police, room 213. In January 1989, he was sentenced to 1 year in prison for a sexual assault case. During the waiting time before the verdict, he had to move back to his grandmother's house. Without wasting any time, he killed his fifth victim, a model named Anthony Sears. It was said that this victim's head became his go-to item for sexual release, as he was infatuated with his appearance and found his head to be extremely beautiful. He attempted to preserve it like a statue for his pleasure at any time. By the early 1990s, it seemed like he had gone crazy. In just a short year, he killed over a dozen victims. From 1991 until he was locked up, he killed another 8 young men. He completely took possession of these victims' bodies, whether trying to preserve them, pickling items in jars, or storing them in freezers to cook and eat later. He believed this was the only way to own their souls. Psychologists later analyzed that he thought eating human flesh was a way to prevent these killed individuals from coming back to life. While he was terrified in a sense, he also desired full possession of these people, thus he wanted to consume their bodies in their entirety. There was an incredibly disturbing aspect in how he dealt with the bodies. He always wished he had a living slave, and he also hoped that the other party could interact with him a little. So when dealing with the people he drugged, he once tried to keep them alive. As long as they did not resist, he would be willing to let them live. But unfortunately, all the experiments he did ended in failure, causing these people to die in great pain. What kind of experiments did he conduct? For example, When he drugged someone and they fell unconscious, he would then use a power drill to bore a hole in their head, creating an opening to pour something in to keep them alive. However, as you can imagine, what he poured into the hole, whether it was hot water, alcohol, or some kind of self-developed substance, none of it worked. In the end, these people all died in great agony. After being arrested on July 22, 1991, a total of 17 victims were discovered, with at least 10 of them being African-American males. This case brought to light the existence of this homosexual serial killer, who was also a cannibal, whose appearance was far from what people expected. Finally, on February 15, 1992, he was sentenced to 957 years in prison by the judge. The case stirred up a heated debate in society about racial tensions and whether homosexuals could be perceived as terrifying cannibals. In prison, many African-American inmates resented him profoundly. This twisted criminal spent the last few years of his life in prison, where he was beaten to death by other inmates. On November 28, 1994, during a routine cleaning in the prison, Jeffrey Dahmer was attacked from behind by a violent offender. Later, when he was discovered by the warden, he was already dead in a pool of his own blood. What do you think about this case? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching the video.